Couples therapists, without breaking confidentiality, what are some relationships that instantly set off red flags, and do you try and get them to work out? One partner says they're seeking your services to help them determine if they want to stay together, the other partner says they're seeking your services to make it so they stay together. Then it's about highlighting the points and allowing the person who is on the fence decide what they want, since the other person knows. Edit. I am sorry to be reading about how many people experienced being the person who wanted to stay together when their partner was unsure. I hope that, whatever happened, you have found or are finding happiness again. That's so depressing, just waiting for someone to decide if they want you. It is depressing, and that's exactly where I'm at right now. Waiting for my husband to decide if he wants to work on our marriage or not. It sucks. I feel like I should say I don't have to wait for you to choose me because I choose me, but then part of me is like, just wait for him. Kind of where my wife and I were before I finally accepted that we should just split. She wanted out like none other. I went to marriage counseling to save my marriage. She went to convince me she didn't want to. Was tough. Sounds exactly like what I went through. Our sessions felt like my ex-wife was getting tons of great advice and me just kind of wondering how we got there. I saw a couple that was doing retaliatory cheating, and telling each other about it. When they got through their anger, they decided to call a truce and made peace. With their level of emotional maturity, I doubt it lasted. I don't know if I helped them or prolonged their suffering. It was their decision to come to counseling, so I think it was the help they wanted. Other clients realize what they really want is divorce counseling. What's the best way to behave civilly and minimize damage to the kids while we go our separate ways? I think it would be great if divorce counseling were normalized. Agreed. I had the same insight during my internship. I provided couples counseling to two girls who were platonic best friends. They simply couldn't handle the stressors of becoming roommates. They separated domestically to save their friendship. This was a gem of a happy ending. That's so cute that they went to family therapy together as friends. Good for them. If we could just normalize and even encourage all kinds of therapy, that would be great. Edit. Unfortunately, therapy is not an accessible or affordable reality for everyone. That is a very real, but separate problem. It absolutely should be easy to afford, and far less difficult to navigate. Therapy should also no longer be a taboo subject or have negative connotation. And also make it affordable, please. This right here. I'm depressed. I need therapy. I have no insurance. Sessions with a therapist are like $200. I can't afford that. What the F am I supposed to do? All the advice I can find online is to give therapy a chance. Really lean into it. That kind of thing. That's really hard when even going to a therapist once basically burns your entire discretionary funds for the month. So what the F am I supposed to do? Seriously, tell me what to do. Please. It's not the same as real therapy, but if you just need someone to tell your problems to, then check out. It's a free service, at least the last time I checked, and you can talk to people who want to listen and help if possible. You're not going to get a professional with experience, but sometimes you can get good insights. Hell, just talking about stuff out loud with someone who won't judge you can be therapeutic by itself. I know it's not the same, but I thought I'd share. Edit. Apparently 7 Cups isn't really a good place anymore. Web link. The two hosts of the podcast My Favorite Murder have been in couples therapy for years. They were pretty new friends when they started it, and when the podcast took off and they started making money, they realized they needed to make sure they preserved their friendship. Georgia had previously been in a situation where she had a TV show with her then bestie and they fell out, and continuing to have to work together was really difficult. They're very open about all their various therapy experiences though, so they talk about it often on the show. That's hilarious, awesome, and an interesting use for a therapist. Lol. Glad it worked out. People who approach therapy with the idea that they must convince the therapist that they're right and their partner is wrong. Almost like they're complaining to a parent or boss to have them sort out the problems. Yes, my patient wanted me to pick a side, and complained about the partner every single time. When I pointed that out, that person just said, "You don't understand." At that point I would just feel bad for the person. This was a majority of the therapy sessions with my ex, trying to point out all the things I did wrong so the therapist could tell us how to fix it. Back when I was trying to establish boundaries with my parents with some encouragement from my therapist, they kept saying they were going to storm into my meetings with the therapist and do just this. Just point all the things they think I do wrong so that they would feel absolved of sin. When I told my therapist about this, it thankfully led to more understanding and encouragement from them, as well as reassurance that if they or anybody else stormed into our meetings to badmouth me, the last thing they'd assume is this is a person worth listening to. Back when I was trying to establish boundaries with my parents. When I was a teen, I got in a fight with my peas. I left the house and went to a friend's home and spent the night. My parents thought I had left to commit suicide. I was not remotely suicidal and they had zero reason to think that. I was just pissed off. Fast forward a week and I find myself in front of a psychiatrist, so not therapy as such with my parents, just me and the doctor. After a session, the doctor said it was all confidential, but if I wanted I could invite my parents in and he could talk with them too. I told him to go ahead and invite them in. It was their idea and their dime. I thought it was all stupid. Long story short, he told them I was a normal teenager and they should lay off a bit. My parents were really not happy with that assessment. My mom, a week or two later, accused me of poisoning the doctor against them, and she was furious about that. I told her she must think a lot of my abilities if I was able to hoodwink a psychiatrist, literal doctor, with over 30 years of experience with my 16-year-old brain. She was not happy about that, but she had no answer, so I counted that as a rare win for me. You take it when you find it. I had a therapist have my back when I was a teenager too. My dad used to make me sign permission slips 72 hours in advance with him if I wanted to request a ride from him. I had to turn in a form that he created that I signed and he filed. If I did not make the 72-hour deadline, I did not get a ride. Obviously, this was one of several things happening that were not okay, and I will never forget the therapist telling my dad, "You can't do that. This is your child. They are entitled to rides." My parents literally knew it'd be like that if they took me to almost any therapist ever, so they specifically sought out therapists that would violate HIPAA and tell them everything we ever spoke about. Plus, they refused entirely to do any family therapy, because they didn't want to heal about them being crafty, effed up people. My mom took me to counseling when I was in high school, various emotional issues, but our relationship was definitely suffering. After meeting with a counselor 2 to 3 times and discussing my life and how I felt about things, for reference, I was a straight A honors student, involved in athletics and school activities, did my own laundry and made or bought my own lunches, etc. The counselor requested my mom join us for a session. The counselor asked my mom a number of gently phrased but rather pointed questions about things like why she would show favoritism to my brother or refuse to allow me to find a part-time job if I wanted one and felt I could handle the work. Strangely, I never had any more sessions with that counselor after that. Yeah, my parents noped right out of more sessions for me too. Thing is, I went to this doctor because he treated my stepbrother who had serious issues. My parents loved that doctor who treated my brother until that same doctor saw me and gave them advice they didn't like. Go figure. I'm not saying I was perfect, far from it. Basically your typical angry teen. I was fine. This happened to me too, when I was a teenager. My parents found a religious therapist who they knew personally from church and made me see her. They even discussed my sessions afterwards without me. Even so, the extent of my parents' behavior towards me was so severe that she invited them to join in a session and told them a lot of things they didn't like, that they would need to change if they wanted a relationship with adult me. That was the end of that. Also, a good therapist avoids taking sides too. They primarily focus on creating empathy between both people. That's why I initially gave up therapy after one session. My therapist heard everything going on in my life and immediately blamed my ex. He wasn't a bad guy at all, we just weren't right for each other. But the "it's all the husband's fault" attitude when I had much deeper issues deterred me for quite a long time and prevented the couple's therapy we desperately needed. Then you are significantly more self-aware than my ex, and I commend you for that. My ex would storm out of the session if the counselor didn't immediately agree with her and blame me. And we tried several different counselors. Contempt. When I experience true contempt from one in the relationship, I know it is usually over. Look towards a peaceful ending at that point if possible. Contempt, one of Dr. John Gottman's 4 horsemen predictors of divorce. Along with criticism, stonewalling, and defensiveness. Yes. Yet I place contempt above them. One can usually work through the others just by reflecting the behavior/patterns, yet contempt borders on hatred. Dug in hatred. Absolutely. You can figure out why you're being critical, you can figure out why you're not responding, you can figure out why you're being defensive. But if you have outright contempt for the person, there's not an easy way to move past that. Once you're in the "I hate even looking at your stupid effing face" territory, the relationship is pretty much over whether you realize it or not. Once the sound of their breathing makes you want to ask, could you just stop? It really is over. That'll do it. In my last relationship, the guy's family had all been openly contemptuous toward me for the entire time I'd known him. I bailed once he started taking on the same attitude. What does contempt look like? What do contemptuous people do? It's basically a combination of pride and disgust towards someone. Someone who is contemptuous towards you is basically saying, "I'm better than you." They may mock or criticize you, and it can hurt. For more information, I recommend you check out Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink. It goes into a lot of detail about contempt in a relationship in one of the chapters. I got this treatment from my family growing up. Haven't spoken to the buttholes in over 10 years and I feel good now. Glad you got out. I saw a comment here in AskReddit a few years back where someone was talking about riding in the car with her husband. A song came on the radio that she really liked and she said something like, "Oh, I love this song." He reached over, acting annoyed, and turned it down/off. Like, goddamn, if the sight of your partner being happy brings out hostility in you, it's effing over. That story has really stuck with me through the years. It's such a small action with such big contempt attached. I couldn't imagine not wanting my partner to just experience a moment of small, simple joy. Edit. It could have been /r/relationship_advice amazingly, /user fluffy hippogriff mentioned the same story below. Web link. Reddit link. My dad used to do that. We learned to say we hated a song if we wanted to hear it. My mom did the same to me. She'd purposefully play songs I didn't like, saying this is on because it upsets you. If I was happy when I got in the car at the end of school, she'd make sure to tell me I was a loser and that none of my friends actually liked me. This is why I'm pro-choice. She didn't want me and made certain I effing knew it. I wish the best for you and hope you're in a better situation now. Thank you. I don't speak to my parents anymore. I'm 29 and have a child of my own now, and every day I try to do something to assure her she's loved and wanted. When I first noticed it, it reminded me of how the bitches and mean girls treated people they didn't like. I wondered if that's how my wife really was in high school and even pointed out that's what her treatment of me seemed/felt like. Still married, quite unhappily, but quite stuck at the moment. Edit. Weird comment to get my first gold on, but thanks. I wasn't going to say much else, and won't give details of what stuck means for me. It's complicated, probably always would be, for multiple compound reasons. Just working through the layers. They act like you're beneath them or lesser than them. A lot of the times this comes along with guilt trips and negative feelings of self-worth in relationships. Why do people stay in relationships when they feel contempt? Lack of communication. When a partner tells you a problem, even a small one, listen. Small problems that aren't addressed break down communication, no longer trust you to listen or act on it, which breeds contempt. In an abusive relationship, small problems are tests of your boundaries that lead to the abuse, all while having you believe you're trapped. This is so true. I grew a lot of resentment and contempt for my last relationship when every small problem was getting ignored. Small grew into big. I wasn't in such a relationship, but I lived with 2 people who were. Watching it from the outside, it was super obvious what the problem was. In short, they hated each other. But they didn't see it. So many reasons. But one big one is that, well, it takes more effort to leave a relationship, and a house, potentially a job, potentially a bunch of friends, etc., than to not leave it. So, habit. Can you define this more? What's an example of contempt? Different than resentment? Mocking, biting sarcasm, eye-rolling, utter disdain. Interrupting, cutting others off, and aggressive body language. Overall, a sense of hatred. Can cut it like a knife in session. Relationship therapist here. One of the biggest red flags I see when working with a new couple is when they've totally forgotten the good. Part of relationship therapy is reconnecting a couple with what they like about each other, what initially attracted them to each other, and what the positives are between them. When people come in and they've been so unhappy for so long that they actually can't remember what it was like to be in love, or to even like each other, they're just about hopeless. You don't have to be happy for therapy to work, but if you can't even reminisce about the good times, then the good times are probably over. Edit. This is clearly resonating with some folks, so I'd like to recommend a book. If you find yourself in this situation, check out Hold Me Tight by Dr. Sue Johnson. She gives some solid explanations of how people get into this cycle, as well as some suggestions on how to try and navigate it. Is it possible for that to be used against one another? In a relationship where one person isn't happy and lets their significant other know, and then other person responds by saying that the other person doesn't remember all the good things they've done in the relationship or all the good times they've had together, what does that mean? Is that still a red flag? Couples that are still fighting still have some amount of connection, even if it's negative. The situation I'm talking about is much more cold and separate. People at this level are usually little more than distant roommates. What you're describing sounds closer to a relationship that one partner has started checking out of, but the other is trying to keep it together. Possibly salvageable, but only if both parties actually want that to happen. F. I think my marriage is over. Thank you for watching. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube. And share them with your friends. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. We welcome your comments below. Another of our videos will begin shortly.